What's good, everybody? What's up, man? It's Stephen Foster II, aka Mr. Qualified. It's your boy, and I'm back finally. I'm back from my little sabbatical from doing the interviews. Jalen did a great job with the women, with the interviews for Women's History Month. So as I know y'all miss her, I hope y'all a little bit happy to see me back. But that's enough about all that. Back to the first guest that's coming back with me. Man, I've been trying to make this happen for a while, and we go back somewhere in college. I can't remember the exact time, but it's been some time. We've known each other and kept in contact, man. But I won't say too much. I'll let him introduce himself, and then we'll just kind of go from there, man. And y'all can get to know who he is. So go ahead and introduce yourself, bro.
Yeah, I'm Tashan Reed. Me and Steve met. That was freshman year at
Yeah.
Mizzou. I believe he was like one of the first Black people I met on campus. I was out there living out in the middle of nowhere by the J school. But
Right.
yeah, right now I'm covering the Raiders for the Athletic. I've been with the company since 2018. I used to cover Florida State football for them. Last year was the first year I got bumped up to the Raiders B. So kind of, it's been a weird time. Obviously last year for everybody, everything being virtual, a bunch of Zoom calls like we on right now. So just learning how to navigate that. I'm kind of excited to get back into the mix, hopefully, as we all, get back to being vaccinated and being healthy and be able to get out here.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And yeah, man, we'll take it back and start with the beginning. I'm not sure if it's more so a passion in sports or a passion in writing or both. But when did you know that writing was something you wanted to do? And did you always know you wanted to write about sports, or was it just like I just want to write?
Yeah, for me, honestly, like I didn't know what I wanted to do growing up. Honestly, for most of my athletic career, all the way through high school, I couldn't decide what I wanted to do as far as a career path. But I was always into sports. Like that was basically from birth. Like my brothers, I got two brothers, and my dad always into sports. The Rams were actually in St. Louis and good at that time. Them winning the Super Bowl, that was one of my first sports memories. My dad was a huge basketball fan. Baseball, it's whatever, but I'm in St. Louis, so we got to watch the Cardinals when the playoffs is on. So, that was always, and I played, like Pop Warner football, little leagues coming up. And writing was kind of just spontaneous. Like I was in class, like I would finish work usually early, and like I would just have time at the end of class. I'm like, shit, I'm gonna make up some stories. I was a big cartoon kid. I was reading a bunch of books. So I'm like, shit, I want to make my own. Kind of form my own narrative. And so like I didn't really think to combine the two, just because I didn't, nobody usually people in my family, like they work jobs. There weren't too many people that had like careers that were fully fleshed out. Whether due to opportunity or life happened or whatever it may be. And once it became clear that I was somebody that was going to go to college and try to get a degree, I was trying to think of the actual career. My dad, he worked at the county jail. My mom was a teacher. So like I said, I knew people with jobs. So like thinking about careers seemed like this big, grand, like difficult decision that I had to make. And I was like, shit, it's something I got to do. The way I'm thinking of it as a high school kid, I'm like, I got to do this for the rest of my life. So I really got to like be into, I went from everything from, everybody goes to the doctor or, something in being a lawyer or something in business. But I was like, I really like sports and writing. Like, what can I do like to kind of combine those two? And I just kind of started researching the journalism industry as a whole a little bit more. Like that was an interesting time just because, like the internet was just taking off. Like as far as like newspapers were going out, like nobody's sitting in their table reading the newspaper anymore. Now people are starting to use their phones and laptops and all that to get their news. And so I kind of just jumped into it, man. Like going to Mizzou, it was kind of the easy choice because it was close to home, like 2 hours from St. Louis. Has one of the best journalism program pretty much out there. And so I kind of just dove into it. But prior to that, I really had no experience with it. Like I hadn't written at any local newspapers in high school. I didn't write for the high school newspaper. Like I basically had no experience. I just knew that those two things were kind of my passions pretty much from the time that I could think.
Yeah, no, that's super real. You saying that, I don't know. I think it's funny how I think a lot of our parents, especially depending on if your parents were middle class or even like lower class, they had jobs. Like you said, they didn't have careers or they didn't have these opportunities where they were necessarily doing something one that they might have been truly passionate about or something that they would consider their passion, and two, something they may have been happy about doing. I think a lot of situations with our parents where they were making ends meet for us, and they took the job that was stable and that they knew, you know, they would be able to depend on. Because like my mom works in real estate. That's not her passion. Like her passion is music, and you know, like she played in church on the weekends. But I'm pretty sure, you know, if she had the desire and wanted to do that full time, and it could have, you know, taken care of us, she would have, you know. But I had the same thoughts in terms of like, oh, I got to do this like this. I guess I got to do this forever, whatever I decide to do, you know, when I go to school. So I don't think we think about that till later, though. Like, I don't know if you kind of, if that made more sense after the fact, or if you realized the impact of that afterwards. But I didn't realize it till maybe after undergrad, the pressure. Because once you get to college, obviously you realize that a lot of people end up going completely different directions, you know, than when they thought when they got there. So I just think that's super intriguing. Like when you really look back on it.
Yeah, they definitely said it with me later in life. I would say once I got into, I mean, it hasn't been that long. I graduated in 2018, but once I, you know, really worked my first full time job, that's when it really hit me, like kind of the magnitude of it. Because even when you're in college, honestly, like especially your first couple years, you know, journalism kind of is what you make it. Like unless you're like actively seeking opportunities to get experience, you're just going to class, you know, basically during the day and go kick it on the weekends and do nothing in the afternoon. You know, it won't really seem like you won't really grasp it, like what the career itself will be until you get into it, like outside of the book learning and outside of the classes and getting into the experience. Like I didn't really do that until my junior year. So that was probably another reason why like it delayed me like getting it, you know, like what it was really about until I was out of school pretty much.
Yeah, no, that completely makes sense. I still feel like I'm kind of waiting to feel that transition. I don't know if I'm looking forward to it, but I know it's coming. But no, so speak to your journalism experience at Mizzou. As you talked about, and as we both know, Missouri, if it's not number one, which I don't remember the last time it wasn't number one, but if it's not number one, it's number two. So it's definitely one of for sure the top journalism programs in the country. What's that experience like? What is the Missouri method? Is it really real? Like, does it really work? Does it really prepare you or set you apart when you go into the real world when it comes to journalism and just those skills that you learn over the time that you're in school?
Yeah, so for me, I was in a FIG. It's called the Walter Williams FIG. It was like one of the journalism groups that they had on campus. That's why I lived in the Mark Twain dorm by the J School. It was kind of like funneled into it. You were like assigned a mentor year one. Mine was like the sports editor at the Missourian at the time, Greg Bowers, and I was kind of intimidated. Like I said, I had never like been in the newsroom. I didn't know much about journalism itself. I didn't know how to write an article. I didn't know how to report or interview somebody. So like going in, he would just basically bring me up to the newsroom, have me sit in on their meetings. I'm listening to them grill people on their stories, and I'm just like, eesh, like that's like, you know, especially as somebody that hadn't done it before, I can only imagine my first one is probably gonna be trash. They probably rip it to shreds, you know, and so it kind of overwhelms you a little bit at first, I would say. And that's, you know, another reason probably my first couple of years why I was a little slow to get into it. You know, I would kind of use like I didn't have a car when I first got to campus, so it was kind of hard to move around and cover things at, you know, the local high schools. Might have a football game or something. For me to get there, I might have to get a ride from somebody, get a ride back, that kind of situation. So it kind of all those factors working together probably contributed to me to having that, you know, slow start. You know, school wise, I was always, you know, on top of it. But like I said, with journalism, you really got to get into the trenches to really get it, you know. And I would go to like the NABJ meetings that we had. Of course, we had the NABJ chapter at Mizzou. It was every Monday or something like that we would meet. Yeah, so just like getting a chance to like talk to some of the older, especially some of this, you know, I mean, to be real, like being in the FIG I was in and just the journalism school in general is mostly white people. So like no one that was finding out about NABJ and then like getting into that room and seeing, you know, not everybody came to every meeting, but you know, shoot, more than just me being the only Black journalism student on campus and like being able to talk to the older ones and get to what the experience was like, even if they weren't in the same path as me as writing, you know, they were broadcast or Stratcom or, you know, whatever it may be. Just kind of having that. I think that's how we met, even at the NABJ meetings. And so just building that community really helped me out and kind of helped me get confidence as well, just because like even when you're looking at like outside of Mizzou, like examples in the industry, you don't really see too many Black faces either. So like that just gave me more confidence that it was like something that was actually possible. And then, you know, kind of carrying over into that junior year, that's when they basically have like these setup classes where you work at the Missourian for 2 semesters. And you're like an unpaid intern, basically. You know, you're working like 20-hour work weeks on top of your school course load. So it's challenging for sure, but I needed that to like I said, get that experience and figure out, the ins and out of being a reporter essentially. And things, I think they started to really take off for me my second semester doing that, because I also, on top of classes, I picked up kind of just a similar like unpaid internship type deal with a SB Nation blog out there, covering Mizzou sports.
Okay.
So I was covering Mizzou men's basketball, women's basketball, football, high school sports. Like I was, writing so many articles and working my ass off. And kind of the work from that semester led me into, getting into the Sports Journalism Institute, which is an internship that I had after my senior year, because like I said, again, coming back to like not having that much experience my freshman and sophomore year, that made it kind of hard to get internships and stuff like that. And so I had an internship my junior year, but it really wasn't even sports related. It was at the St. Louis American. I was writing about like politics and crime and like newsy stuff. You still learn from that stuff too, but I wanted to like secure something that was really focused in on sports. And that's what the Sports Journalism Institute was. But I wouldn't have got that internship if it hadn't been for, the opportunities to get experience kind of built into my course load at Mizzou. Like a lot of schools don't even have a journalism program. And even the ones that do, they damn sure may not have a class where you're basically a reporter and you have to work independently as one and report to an editor and publish stories and cover a beat. There's just stuff that you don't get every single place. So definitely getting that experience, when I was, 20, 21 years old, pretty much springboarded my career.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that that experience is definitely unmatched. And even as somebody who didn't become fully immersed in that, I think I realized early on, like for me, I think I knew from jump, like, I don't think that's my route of journalism. Like, I don't think I want to cover beat. Like, I respected it though, because I know how much goes into, like you said, like being able to cover a beat, like just the time consumption of it all is ridiculous. So that's why I always say, like, J school kids, like, y'all got all my respect. Hey, look, I don't got nothing to say to y'all. Y'all got it. But yeah, I knew that wasn't for me. But those who do, I think I've seen. I mean, if y'all don't know, I mean, like Mizzou alum, like we don't. It's not just a bragging thing because we went there. Like Mizzou alum, especially Mizzou alum from the J school, really like go on like to do amazing things. But I think it is because of that preparation and those experiences that you spoke to. I'm not sure if one of the things that you mentioned would be it, but was there a moment or a specific time or span of time where you would say things kind of clicked and you was like, okay, this is the route I want to go, or this is what I need to do, or even when you kind of finally solidified this is where I want to be. Did you have one of those moments in college? Was it after college, and what was that moment exactly?
I think it happened. The switch kind of happened in college. I think it was kind of, after I finished up the first semester in the reporting class, I was covering high school football, I believe, no, high school sports in general. So I was covering like football, girls and boys basketball, tennis, basically whatever sport was in the area. And then the second semester, they wanted me to cover high school football. And like, when I look back at it, like the pure audacity that I have to be like, because I was like, nah, I'm over high school sports. Like I'm ready to cover Mizzou now, basically. Like, I was like, nah, I'm not. That's what led me to like apply for that SB Nation kind of separate internship on top of the class. That was something I did on my own. Like that wasn't. And so like the high school sports, because high school stuff is tough. Like you got to keep your home stats. Like obviously, it's lower level. It's kind of hodgepodge. People don't read it as much. You don't get as much attention or traction on your stories. But like when I got the chance to like not just go to a Mizzou game as a student, but like cover one, like interview coach and the players after, and write an article based on that, and kind of see my profile start to rise a little bit, and then covering the men's and women's basketball team. So it was kind of that semester of like not only getting the chance to do those things, but like knowing that like I could do those things, like balance basically being on 3 different beats with also covering the high school football beat. So I'm basically juggling 4 beats on top of being a full-time student. Like, as you know, that shit ain't easy. So like the fact that like I could like efficiently juggle all of that and like not just be doing it, but be doing it at a high enough level to where I get noticed for something like SJI. That's when I was like, okay, I know I can do this. Like, not to say that I lacked confidence before, but that like doing it and showing yourself is a different thing, and it kind of sends you into another level, and that kind of propelled me forward from there. So I would say, I guess it wasn't necessarily a moment, but it just kind of that semester in general is kind of when I knew like this was it.
For sure. Yeah, no, I think you made a great point. I think a lot of us will do things and we'll be juggling a lot, but it'll be just that we're juggling. And it's kind of like one of them is good at one point in time. And then if another one is good, usually what was good before it drops off. But I think
Right.
I think when you get to a point where, like you said, you can effectively and efficiently balance things of those magnitude, because like you said, being a full-time student, crazy.
Right.
Especially in the J school, doing a complete outside internship on top of what you were already doing for a class. Yeah, you can do all those things on a high level. That's obviously, I think the confidence is even an understatement. I feel like once you do that, I feel you. I don't even think it's audacity. Nah, I'm done with high school sports.
Mhm.
Like, because but I think sometimes you have to show yourself that, and I think for a lot of people, we'll talk ourselves out of doing it before really attempting to do it. And we make it seem impossible. But I mean, I'm glad, and it seems to have worked out for you perfectly, seeing where you work at now. But speak to that, man. How did the athletic happen? What was that application process like? What was it quick? Was it a little bit slow? Did they put you through the ringer? Just go ahead and take us through that.
Yeah, so it really, I keep circling back to SJI. The internship was founded by two people back in the 90s, Leon Carter and Sandy Rosenbush. Sandy, she worked basically everywhere, Sports Illustrated, Washington Post, like ESPN. Leon, when he first started, he was a editor at the New York Daily News, but he then later became one of the vice presidents at ESPN.
Wow.
And so these are like pretty heavy hitters. And then later on, one of the former students, he was a student in the 90s. He later became like part of the leadership team, Greg Lee. Right now, he's at the Boston Globe, but he used to work for the Athletic. He helped run the DC site. And Leon, actually, now he's one of the editorial directors here at the Athletic. But kind of, I met Leon. I was a freshman at Mizzou. Like I said, the freshman, like my initial year, I was super overwhelmed. Like I met Leon and I was so shook just because it's like the sports editor like introduced me to him, like, oh yeah, this is just one of the vice presidents of ESPN. I'm like, what? Like, like, excuse me. And now he's like this, he's an older black dude. He's always wearing a suit, looks super serious. So I was shook when I first met Leon, but I kept in touch with him. And my senior year, that's when I felt like I had enough experience because of that semester that I mentioned. I had enough, examples of my work to where I felt comfortable applying for it. Uh, but, basically the way it works is is now it's hosted at a different school. That time it was like hosted at Mizzou.
Yeah.
So basically in the summer they would invite all the students out, and you had to be a minority to apply for it. So it was only people of color or women, or obviously women of color. And so they brought us all out to Mizzou for like a boot camp, and it was basically like just crash course from like journalism 101. Like I said, because not everybody in the program, like, obviously we had people like me from Mizzou. We had, one of my better friends from the program. He went to Arizona State, another top journalism school. We also had people from smaller schools that didn't have that formalized journalism program. So they were going over like some of the basics. Obviously I knew some of that stuff, but they had to make sure that all of us were prepared as possible, going forward, because the second part of the internship is you have a 10-week internship at an actual publication. And so for mine, I was getting sent out. I knew I was getting sent out to the Commercial Appeal. So getting that paper out in Memphis, Tennessee. And so like I knew that was coming, but also within like the boot camp, like there's a lot of networking opportunities, because like they'll have, like I remember my class, they got Mike Wilbon on the phone for us to talk to, like Lisa Salters to talk to, like some of the alums that have gone through the program in years past. There've been some, like he recently passed away, but like Siku Smith was a Marcus Thompson, one of my coworkers now is an alum. There's a bunch of people, like the list goes on and on, but like, I'm meeting all these people, I'm networking at the boot camp, and one of the people that actually came out and flew out like to visit us in person at the time, he was the college football editor. His name is Dan Uthman, and he worked for the Athletic. At the time, the Athletic was pretty new in 2018. Like it had only been around for like a couple of years, so like I knew what it was, but I wasn't like the Athletic wasn't like this massive thing that has become now. Like a lot of people still didn't know what it was at that time. Like, he was one of maybe like more than probably 24 people that I interacted with that week. So it was kind of like, all right, exchange business cards, yada yada. But we actually kept in touch after that. And into my internship, I was maybe halfway through, and kind of out the blue, he asked me to email him like an example, like one of the like most proud stories that I worked on since I started the internship.
Mm.
And then like a few days later, I think, or a week later, he got me on the phone and he was just like, what do you think? We were catching up at first, and he was like, "What do you think of like covering Florida State football?" And I was like, I hadn't really thought about it, but if it's an opportunity there, I'll think about it now. And so basically from there the kind of the process took off, and I ultimately agreed to take the job covering Florida State football. And I reached out to basically the founders of the internship just to make sure that, because like I said, it was supposed to be a 10-week internship.
Mm.
But I was like, is it okay like if I end the internship early? Like I'm not trying to like create a bad relationship with the internship for future years. Like if
Right.
that would keep like another student a year from now from having the same internship because they mad because the last one left.
Yeah.
So after I made sure it was all good, I took the job and went from Memphis to St. Louis again, packed up my shit, and moved to Tallahassee, Florida.
Man, yeah. And I mean, I think it's hard to put into words sometimes. Like listening to that story, there's so much appreciation I have for it, even though like it's not my story. But just knowing like how much networking, like the names you just mentioned, like those are big names in sports. So, and like one, not everybody gets the opportunity to even brush brush shoulders with those people, and you get the opportunity to not only brush shoulders but actually speak, have conversations, exchange numbers, and then also have further and follow-up conversations. Then that eventually leads to a job with a platform that's now just as known as any other sports platform, which is crazy because I feel like if you had told somebody back then, obviously like that's it's hindsight, but if you tell somebody back then, yeah, this is what's about to happen, you're not really even thinking that far out. But I think sometimes, at least for me, and knowing you, I'm thinking of it like, man, yeah, it makes sense to me. Like I knew he took it seriously. I knew he was very serious about this craft. So seeing where seeing where you've went and seeing where you're about to go has just been amazing. But man, let me get off that soapbox. That's just me talking about stories and whatnot. But so you covered Florida State for 2 years. What was that experience like? What was your first? How was your first couple of years? Really, one having the full-time job and doing sports journalism full-time, and then just what was it like actually being on that beat? I remember seeing you would get a lot of I wouldn't call it hate, but you get your responders comments. So you get your people actually coming at you, but you also in that space get to defend yourself and actually let them know like I ain't just writing for my health. Like I'm at these games, I'm watching, I'm following these players. So just speak to that experience and what you feel like some of your biggest lessons have been from that so far.
Yeah, so I mean, the biggest thing for me going into it was just the fact that like that was my first time. Although I had been in Memphis for like a month for the internship, this was my first time like moving to live somewhere that wasn't in Missouri. Like I grew up in
Yeah.
St. Louis, been there my whole life. Then I went to Mizzou, which is 2 hours from St. Louis. So I had never really like left the area. I didn't even travel too much. Like before I took that job, I'd never been to Florida in my life. So like I had no like preparation just from the practical like level of like living in a different state that I had never been to straight out of college. That's an adjustment by itself. Not to mention you're also like starting your career on a pretty major beat for your first job, barely, a couple months out of school. So it was a lot to deal with at once. So like first couple months, it was just kind of processing all that and getting used to it, while also trying to like, because I mean, a beat like Florida State, you got people that have been on that beat for like 20 plus years.
Yeah.
That's a lot of catching up to do. That's not just familiarity with the program, but they have sources. They're already in with some of the. They had a new coaching staff with Terry that year, but the athletic director they may have relationship with, the PR people to get interviews they may have better relationships with. So like for me, as this fresh young kid that had never covered Florida State or covered anything before, for that matter, really, on a professional level from out of state, I didn't have that much. I mean, I knew what Florida State was, but I wasn't like in depth knowing the entire roster and all that. And so it's just a lot of learning that first year. Like it was hard for sure. But I think I handled it as about as well as I could. Uh, it helped me out having some people on my staff who had either covered, not on my staff, but on the athletic staff who had like, either covered Florida State or knew people there, kind of helped me along the way, some of the veteran writers. That's something that I've always been willing to do. I know a lot of people kind of when they struggle, they feel like they got to figure it out on their own, so they don't look away to their bosses. I ask questions like, shit, if I don't know something, I'm gonna figure out who does know and go talk to them so I know for moving forward. Like, that's how I operate. So I did a lot of preparation before the season doing that, but also once I got into the mix and like something happened that I may not have been like prepared for or understood, I would go get help for it. So, and by the time, I got through that first year, I kind of felt like I had, people knew who I was at that point. It wasn't, kind of on Twitter, I still get challenged here and there, but like people accepted, like, I'm here now covering the team. I'm one of the beat writers.
Right.
And also I kind of, and I think kind of where I got into a good amount of my like tips on Twitter was like I was the only basically Black person that was like a full-time writer on the beat at first. One of them came later on in the second year, but that first year I was the only one. And so I would like, Willie Taggart was the first Black coach at Florida State. Most of these players are Black. Some of these issues that would come up, like I remember they lost one time and like somebody put like Willie Taggart's face on like a noose, like a body that was hanging from a noose. And like, and I would, me, like I said, not only am I from St. Louis, I'm from Ferguson, and all this stuff just happened a couple of years
Right.
down here. So like, I was very outspoken about a lot of that stuff, and like, luckily, because not everybody has that privilege of like the Athletic had a pretty, I would say, lenient like social media policy where you could like express your views and how you feel about things without getting punished for it. Some companies, you do that kind of stuff, you might get fired.
Yeah.
But like, as long as I wasn't like, calling anybody out their name or something crazy or attacking people, I was able to basically be myself on social media and like also having so like getting more comfortable on the job, but also like knowing that I could still like be me, kind of in my own space, even though I'm like, being a public figure now I'm verified on Twitter and all this shit. People follow me and, coming to me for news and kind of you have to have a certain image for sure. You have to be professional still, but like I can also like not be a robot. So that made it not only am I getting to write about sports and write itself being fun to me, but also like I can have fun, like being myself and showing my personality. So I kind of really grew to enjoy it, I would say, more so going into the second year, just because I didn't have such a big learning hurdle to get over.
Yeah.
And I was more comfortable, so it came easier to me. It was still hard work, but like it wasn't as like daunting as it was when I first started. But I think the thing for me was like this kind of parallels back to that situation I had in when I was covering, I was working at the Missouri and was like, all right, I've done the high school thing, like I'm ready for something new. And it was kind of like with the college thing, even though I'd only been covering Florida State for 2 years, like I've been covering Mizzou for another year on top of that. So I'm like, all right, I get the college thing. Like I'm ready for another challenge. This is kind of how like I am in general. Like I'm always looking for like that what next thing. Not to say that I'm like unhappy with the job that I have, but I had at the time. But I was like, covering the professional level was always my goal, like from the onset. And so after that second season, we had the opening with Raiders moving to Vegas. They were going to keep their current writer, which was Vic Tafer. He's based in the Bay Area, but they also wanted to add somebody on the ground in Vegas to be there full time. And so when I was honestly, when I saw the opening, I wasn't even sure. Like I was like, I've only been on the beat. I haven't been on the beat for 2 years yet.
Right.
I'm still pretty fresh out of college. There's probably some more experienced people that'll apply for it, probably get it. Let me put my name in the hat though. Let me see if I can get it. And so went through the interview process, felt pretty good. Went to the combine. That's where we have like our, or before COVID hit, we had like our annual meeting for the NFL and college football staffs in the combine. And like our NFL editor at the time, like no decision had been made, but like she made it like a point of like introducing me to the Raiders writer in particular. Like it was just like, I was kind of, that's kind of interesting. Like that, I didn't know at that point, but like a week later, they called me and was like, yeah, offer you the Raiders job kind of situation. And so it kind of shocked me, honestly. Like I said, like when I applied for it, like I didn't 100% or like even 50% probably think I was going to get it. But that was early March 2020. And so it was like, all right, that's exciting. Now I got to move coast to coast from Tallahassee, Florida to Las Vegas. It's like, shit, and then a week after that phone call hit, there's this thing called the coronavirus in the US. And so I'm like, oh, I start seeing like NBA shuts down their season. I'm like, oh shit, like, okay, it might not be an NFL season this year.
Yeah.
I might not be covering the Raiders this year, so A week after I get the job, I'm talking to the bosses like, is this still, are we still doing this? Is it still a thing? Do I still need to move? All this. And I had some last March was a crazy time for me family wise. I had some family members pop up with COVID that like I got stuck in Atlanta basically for a month with my sister there because I couldn't go back home to St. Louis because my dad had COVID. And so like I was covering like this time last year, basically I was covering the draft. I was covering the Las Vegas Raiders draft from Atlanta, Georgia. Like it was the most random shit ever. And then I finally get to St. Louis. I stayed there for like an extra month just because all the, the family turmoil and the things that we had been through. I wanted to spend some time around the people. Plus I was still like seeing what it was with COVID. Like, that was only a couple months into it.
Right.
But eventually and it was a long ass drive because I was driving this whole time, but I drove from St. Louis to Vegas and finally got out here. And kind of, did the same process. It was kind of the same situation when I started on the Florida State beat. I had never been to Vegas. I had never been out west really. I hadn't been any further west than like Denver in my life. So this was another like same kind of situation, except now I added in the fact that like there's an ongoing global pandemic and basically we're on the edge of like race relations uprisings in the country. That was like in the summer, so all the George Floyd stuff was happening.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, bro, I've had some real interesting transition periods, but it's working out so far. I'm navigating.
Yeah, no, you went right into it, man. I definitely was gonna ask about COVID, but before that, I definitely want to kind of jump back. What is it like, or what responsibility do you personally take in making sure that issues that affect us as minorities, in particular, are talked about on a platform where everybody has to pay attention? So just making it a point to use your voice and use your platform to make sure, like you said, that things aren't going to happen, and you're not going to be somebody that has been around that has seen that knows the negative impact it can have on us as people, and just not speak about it. Like what personal responsibility do you feel like you have, or do you just personally take when it comes to discussing those issues and making sure that they're talked about on the platform that you have?
Yeah, kind of how I alluded to earlier, like there really aren't many Black faces in this industry. So I kind of, knowing that, being one of the few, at the time, Black college football writers on a prominent beat, and now being one of the few Black NFL writers, it's kind of like if I don't talk about it, then who else will? Like, of course, there are going to be other Black writers that would do it, but like, theoretically, it's like if we don't carry that burden, are we expecting, our mostly white counterparts to do it? Or if they do it, to do it well and as thorough and kind of with the knowledge that we have of it inherently. And it's something that, of course, like we're all directly linked to as Black men in America. So like when I see these incidents happen, I actually have, like, separate from my job, I have an emotional reaction to it, and so it's only natural. Like I said, I'm luckily I work at a place where I'm able to be me and like let some of that not carry over into my work when it makes sense to do so. And last year I wrote a lot about race, and not all of it had to do with sports. And like, not everybody has, that platform, not only like, being in this industry, but being Black in this industry and working at a place that essentially allows you to still be Black and like in everything that means. And so like, if I don't take advantage of that, like, what am I doing? And so it's like, it just makes the most sense to me. And so like, I don't care if people get mad at me on Twitter about it, or if it rubs some people the wrong way. I really don't give a shit, to be honest. Like, as long as I'm straight with my bosses and it's good work, I'm gonna keep doing it.
That's real. I wouldn't be mad.
Yeah.
No reason to be. But yeah, so back to COVID. You already touched on some of the personal things you were dealing with and how it affected your transitional period. I guess my only other question would be, what do you feel like was the biggest thing that changed about you as a journalist and as a writer within the pandemic? Like, was there anything that made you change your approach to writing, the way that you write, the way you view anything that you're covering? I don't know if it seems like a vague question, but I mean, obviously the pandemic changed everything for everyone. I think it changed the way a lot of people just genuinely look at work. It changed the way a lot of people approach work. And so I'm just wondering, from your perspective as a journalist, as in a profession where being on the ground, being right there, being able and having access to players is so instrumental to your job and so necessary. What did the pandemic change about how you go about doing your job?
Not to say that I wasn't like I didn't already have this trait, but I just had to get more creative. Was the main thing, just because in the world of pandemic, like last year, we didn't, normally, when you cover an NFL team, you have locker room access. That's how you get to meet most of the guys and build relationships and get exclusive interviews. All that's out, it's all through Zoom now. So everybody's getting the same interview essentially. They might work with you here and there to get like a phone interview with somebody, but for the most part, the team isn't going to really cooperate with you that much to get exclusives and things like that. And so, and especially coming in my first year, like I didn't have relationships with players, pre-existing or coaches or the front office or agents or the PR staff. Even like I was basically starting from a clean slate. I hadn't met most of these people, and I still haven't met most of these people. And so it's like how with that, like the lack of access, everybody's getting the same shit. Like how do you stand out? How do you be different? Especially when you're working for a company that's subscription only. Like you can't read my stuff unless you subscribe. And if it ain't different from everybody else stuff, why would you pay for it? And so I had to find ways to be different. And it wasn't easy. It came to my first off season on the beach, just busting my ass when it came to like reaching out to agents and trying to get in touch with guys and tell their stories and mostly feature stories, I would say, kind of profiles going through people's lives, kind of how we're doing it now, in article form. And that gave me some familiarity going into the season. And then throughout the year, I just kind of tried to find ways where, like, even if we were all writing about the same thing, how can I go more in depth? What statistics can I use? Who can I talk to? What extra phone call can I make? Like which staffer, that works for the Athletic that knows more about the specific detail can I talk to about and flesh it out some more if it's something that I'm not knowledgeable about. Just basically using my resources that I did have and, putting in a little bit of extra hard work in order to be unique and creative in my story angles and kind of stand out, especially, working with this is the first time that I had a partner on the beat, Vic Tafer, he's also another Raiders writer. So we're splitting content to a degree. I can't necessarily do whatever, we talk about it, but, if he already has a story, I can't go do the same story. I have to come up with something else. So that's another layer to the creativity that you have to have, just because you don't have free reign on the beat like you do when you're by yourself and you basically write about whatever you want to. And so, yeah, that was the biggest thing, especially like as the year went on, like, access actually got more restricted as the year went on. And so, and then when you have a team that like, the Raiders, they were interesting. There's always, the big beat, but like they were an 8-8 team. So they were basically an average football team. So like on top of being creative, like you got to keep people interested in a team that isn't necessarily, lighting it up every week. Like if they're coming off a 30-point loss, how do you make people want to read your stuff? So it's basically, that's a constant thing. I don't think that ever stops necessarily, but especially in a year like COVID, like 2020, it's still going on now, of course, but like, and I'm about to cover another draft remotely right now. We didn't have the combine this year. Covering free agency remotely this year. So there's still a lot of stuff, like even this year, that's carrying over. So it's still ongoing, but I'm more comfortable with it now. But basically, COVID just made it more imperative for you to like be creative and then bust your ass to like actually execute, whatever creative ideas you may come up with.
For sure. Yeah, I think creativity is probably one of the things that COVID birthed out of a lot of people across different industries. I think you had to find a way to keep people interested in whatever you were doing, because COVID itself brought in exhaustion and a somewhat this kind of just feeling of not even wanting to just exert energy in finding things or paying attention, because you're just like, why am I stuck in the house, or why can I not go here, or why can we just not be outside? Like all these things that don't really necessarily get better, even with things somewhat getting better on a I don't want to say government level, but just better in the sense of things kind of progressing. But no, that's extremely real, and I think that's also very important in journalism, because like you said, it's not a trait that you didn't have, but I think even without something like COVID, that would be something that every journalist should be thinking about, how to creatively separate themselves, and I don't know, just figure out how to always have a lane of your own. Like you all are doing the same thing, you all are covering the same thing, and you all fall under the same umbrella, but everybody has different lanes or can have different lanes. So which one is yours? So No,
Yeah.
that's amazing, man. I feel it. So, man, the last question, the question everybody that I interview or that gets interviewed on this platform has to be asked. Man, so with everything, with your journey, with everything that comes with being a black man and sports journalism, everything that you've learned and accomplished up to this point, what do you feel like makes you as a sports journalist, and just I don't know. This is very vague, but also just as a black man, that doesn't have to be super literal. But just within all those things and within all your identities, what do you feel like makes you qualified?
I think it's something that I kind of spoke to a little bit earlier, but whether it's as a journalist, just as a person, as a black man, or as a figure that I am in my family and moving forward, one day probably being a father and a husband. I just kind of have like this constant. I won't even call it a desire, but like I almost have like a need to improve. Like I can't. I never get satisfied. Like even being where I'm at now, like I'm covering a prominent NFL team at 25 years old at a major publication. Like it'd be easy to get like content with that, and like I'm making enough money to get by. Like I don't have major debt. Like my family, knock on wood, right now they're good. Like I don't have a lot of things to worry about right now, so it'd be good. It'd be really easy to like feel good in that, and like not that I don't. Like I'm not unable to appreciate that, but it's like I was saying earlier, it's like, all right, what's next? What can I do? What how can I improve? What can I do better? Um, how can I get in better shape? Outside of work, like mental shape, like everything. And so it's not that like I'm not delusional. I don't think that I'm ever going to be perfect. Like nothing can be perfect. But that's kind of the quest. Like that's the fun of it. That's what keeps life fresh. As long as we're here, is like for me anyway. Like I just want to get better. And like I'm sure, as I get older, even 70 years old, I want that to continue. Like as long as I'm here, like there has to be some kind of way, within my world and within my realm as that changes throughout the years. Maybe I'm not covering the Raiders forever, of course, but um I just kind of always want to be. It's not like I don't want to be a corny. Like it's not like a get better 1% every day type situation, or get kind of the cliche stuff that you hear a lot from athletes. But like it's just kind of more like from a holistic standpoint, like from year to year or every 10 years or as life goes on. Like I don't want to ever get stagnant, And so, uh, and that's all internal. Like it's not I think a lot of times we kind of get caught up in like all the external pressures of the world, especially now with kind of how social media shapes things. It makes it seem like everybody's living their best life. But my shit is all for me. Like my family, they're good. Everybody that matters to me is good where I'm at. But like that's all internal, and so I don't think that's something that's ever going to stop just because it's coming, directly from the source.
Most definitely, man. Yeah, probably. I mean, I feel like all the answers to that question are good, but I love what you said in terms of there just being this quest to always improve. I think that in whatever you do, there's a space to obviously acknowledge your accomplishments and acknowledge that that you did something and that you're proud of yourself. But I think within that, there should always be a, like you said, a what's next. There should always be a what more can I do? I think that's just how you always stay sharp, like you said. So I completely agree, man. I love it. I love it. Man, like I said, it feels like it's long overdue. Most definitely is. But thank you again for taking the time to let me interview you. Little old me. Stuff. But no, man. But thanks for taking the time. Thanks for sharing your story. Thanks for sharing your insight. And man, I'm just happy to one have known you up to this point. Two, to be able to witness the journey that you're on right now, man. And I honestly can't wait to see what else you're able to accomplish, what else you do, what else you might be able to cover. I'm probably gonna see you on the TV, having one of these spots one day, man. So I'm just waiting to the day, so you can just remember me over here. Nah, man. But no, definitely excited to see where you go, man, and definitely just excited for your journey moving forward, bro. So
Thank you, bro. Appreciate you having me on.
of course, man, always. Anything you want to say to anybody anywhere where they can follow you, where they need to subscribe if they trying to get the subscription for the athletic, all that good stuff.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead and head over to the Athletic. Follow me on Twitter at Tashan Reed. Subscribe, follow the work. Whether you care about the Raiders or not, I write about other stuff. I kind of I write, like I said, I write about race a lot. I write about culture. I'm starting to write in, getting into music and writing about fashion and all kinds of stuff. So it's not just I know I talk a lot about sports, a lot about writing, journalism, but I promise it's not all like work related with me. Like, you know, we got some fun stuff going on over there. So definitely come out and support.
For sure. Most definitely. Well, y'all heard it here. Definitely go follow and support. He's on this platform, so obviously he's somebody that y'all need to be supporting. But yeah, man, until next time, until next episode, I'll see y'all later. Peace.